Please like and leave a heart. Please.
There we go. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Vidor Locksmith Show. I'm your host, David Gibson, where we are unlocking the secrets to success in the oil and gas industry, one interview, one technical presentation, one technical screw-up at a time. If you catch the technical screw-up of the day, please let me know in the comments section so I can get it fixed and we can get the show back and rolling again. Taking a couple of weeks off here. Had a little trouble getting some guests scheduled. Our last episode that we tried to do with Eric Caillou, really appreciate him trying to come on. We are getting that one rescheduled. So Eric is definitely going to be coming back on, getting everything tested out and working right. Yes, beautiful Friday here. Guys, please let me know where you guys are watching from. Love to be able to give you a shout out here on the show. As well, be sure to comment because we have got some awesome giveaways to be able to do today. Where we got? There we go. So we've got one of our 3D printed drill bits. This one, I don't know if you guys can tell, it's actually got it's kind of like a bass boat black. It's got the little black, little speckles and stuff in it. It's actually a pretty cool one. Be sure to, whoever wins that one, get that one off to them. And then as well, we've got our little nameplates here that we're going to be giving away for Rig Reports. Yeah, maybe I should put their thing up here on the screen. There we go. Give some airtime to our amazing sponsor, Rig Reports. Right, you can check them out at rigreports.com. But yeah, Talal over there made me this and is making one for whoever the winner is today. We'll have that drawing there towards the end of the show. Put that back over there and click that one. Yeah, so let's give some hellos out there. So we got Soren says good afternoon from Soren at Drill Consult, Copenhagen, Denmark. All right, we already got the show started off with the international flavor. Mr. John DeWart from sunny Elkhart Lake, Wisconsin. Almost time to go motor racing. Yeah, curious what's racing out there this weekend. And we've got Tony Evans tuning in from Mississippi. Of course, our sponsor for the show, so says good morning from Houston. Thanks for being here, sir. Duncan Blue tuning in from Houston as well. Mr. Reed Goodman. Good morning from the the F350. Okay, well, maybe I can read, maybe I can't. Maybe the technical problem today is just me, right? And then obviously, there we go. Hashtag Rig Reports. All right, let's do our little commercial here real quick because we have an absolutely amazing guest today, and I want to get as much time with him as we possibly can. Let me get over here. And while we're doing this, be sure to, like I said, put in hashtag Rig Reports and for your chance to win the drill bit and our little nameplate. So let's see here. There it is. We'll run this little commercial. We'll be right back with you. All right. I've got to tell you guys about Rig Reports from Mi4. They are sponsoring the show, and Rig Reports is the daily operations app for operators, consultants, and it is really impressive. Imagine this, you are no longer stuck messing with Excel, email, or paper reports. Everything is digital, automated. It's much more accurate and efficient. You get real-time data access to reports and analytics, which means you can make decisions immediately. It will save you time when doing things like lookbacks or approving invoices that come in months after the job. It's also user-friendly. Most people figure out how to use it most people figure out how to use it without trading. That's a big plus. And for our consultants, you'll have all of your clients set up with their own databases, and you can switch between them seamlessly. Trust me, it's worth checking out. All right, guys, let's get back to the episode. I need to learn how to be able to be a better advertiser and card reader. Not doing my best there. I will get better. That's for Talal and for everybody else out there. Oh, wow. All right, we got somebody tuned in from Newfoundland. Josh, thanks for being here. There we go, guys. Thank you. Rig Reports. There we go. Everybody's joining in on. Oh, almost forgot. Tell everybody, check out rigresume.com. It's a new project between myself and the guys over at Rig Reports. A great way to be able to digitally automate your resume, right? You can put in the API numbers, and it'll automatically fill in the jobs that you've been on. It will help you with putting the wording in, searching for jobs, all kinds of amazing things. Go out there and check it out. It is beta as of today, rigresume.com. So, all right, let's get on with the show. Most importantly, guys, before we kick this off, if you guys have got questions, this is the show to be able to join in and be able to ask them. This person is absolutely amazing, and I can't wait to be able to kick this off. All right, so welcome to the show, Dan Romito.
What's up, bud? How you doing, man? I'm a little bit nervous. You say technical difficulties. I didn't realize this was a live show. Usually I get to go back and edit out all the swearing that I do in these things.
So you're more than welcome to do that. I'm not Mr. Beast. I'm not worried about my algorithm on YouTube.
I'm just playing around.
It's okay. It tends to slip out and happen every once in a while. So we're more than welcome to be able to let it happen. So for those that don't know who you are, give us a quick background on who you are and what you do in the oil and gas industry.
Yeah, sure. So Dan Romito, I'm a managing director in a firm called Pickering Energy Partners. The firm was spun out of, for the bankers on the phone, Tudor Pickering Holt, about 2020. TPH 2.0 or PEP 2.0, however you want to call it. The focus of our firm is that we think, obviously, fossil fuels are going to drive the path on the energy frontier moving forward, but there's all these set of ancillary technologies and capabilities that we have to be very mindful of. Because of that, there's also a lot of, I don't want to use the misinformation word, but there's just a lack of understanding of how energy actually works. And so my group works with companies, both asset managers, private companies across the board, on facilitating broader access to quality capital, getting the narrative right with stakeholders they would deem important. Policymakers, regulators, we can talk about that, dude, just going through the ringer, talking to the lobbyists, the politicians, the policymakers on this stuff. And then, if we're being honest, the energy space really is one of the only sectors where the data in some cases, especially as it relates to emissions, is a little bit guesswork. Doesn't necessarily mean it's wrong, but it's not aggregated or measured the same way that the other sectors have it. So you have to have that sort of alignment when you're working with people outside of the energy companies on how to understand that.
So one thing you said there that really kind of stood out to me is a lot of people don't understand how energy works.
That's right.
How does energy work? Like, what is y'all's perspective on that? I know that is a huge question to be able to answer, but I mean, if anybody can, it's you, sir.
Yeah, I mean, I think let's just call it the previous 4 or 5 years, whatever it was, there is this growing sentiment that the world could immediately flip towards renewables. And once again, man, people sometimes get the idea that I am anti-renewables. I'm actually pro what works. And so whatever that is, call it whatever you want. I don't care. Like, as long as it works, I could care less. But like I said, there's this growing sentiment, at least with the general consensus, that you could just turn on the switch and we'd go from a fossil fuel based infrastructure to a renewable infrastructure overnight. And that's just not the case, right? We tend to get held up on just the first tenet of power generation, right? Whether it's coal, natural gas, nuclear, hydro, what have you. What people don't necessarily realize is there's 3 tenets of power. There's the generation, but there's also the transmission and the distribution. And the transmission and the distribution part is actually the more critical stuff, because that's how you get stuff from point A to point B. That's how you optimize the balance between what the energy mix is to ensure that you have reliability and affordability. And when you have these discussions with people who are usually outside of the realm of the energy space, like, they think you're doing some like magic trick on them, that there's some black magic that you lay upon them, that, it's all news to them. Not to give the gratuitous plug, but I actually wrote the book, right, The Radical Middle, and outlined this in the book. I was having a conversation, I'll give you an example. I was giving a conversation to a CFA society. So once again, very smart, very educated, very established professionals, and everyone came there, to learn. And there was one woman who was insistent that electricity came from electricity. Like, oh, she goes, you just turn on the switch and out it comes. And this is like, I don't know, like 3-4 years ago, whatever it was. And that was sort of like the aha moment, where if you have this person who is, I think she was Ivy League educated, or, the equivalent, CFA, portfolio manager, very established, clearly smart. If she's thinking in her brain that electricity comes from electricity and you simply just turn on the switch and the magic happens, then we have to take a huge step back and really retell the tale of how the energy dynamic actually works. And for the most part, we've been doing that. I mean, obviously assisting clients along the way, but I think the energy space takes for granted the degree that they're an economic necessity. And I think in some cases they think there's an immunity from actually telling the story, and that's fine in some cases. But when you allow that dynamic to evolve, what ends up happening is that people who, just for the sake of wanting the industry to go away for whatever personal or ideological reasons they have, they do all that they can to take control of the narrative, and they start putting information and data and disclosure and reporting that just showcases that, the industry is the fifth ring of hell. And while we're certainly no angels, and no sector is, and while we've had blemishes, to say the least, along the way, that doesn't necessarily mean that the detractor narrative is correct. So my opinion is that the sector has to do a much better job of preemptively and proactively highlighting how this stuff actually works.
And so, I mean, for y'all's part, and, for the knowledge of, a lot of the people that are in the oil and gas industry, or we should just say the energy business, how do we tackle that problem?
Yeah, I think we make it simple. One of the things, and I'm being objective and loving when I say this, and I obviously have nothing against engineers, but when you start asking people in the energy space, like, tell me about this stuff, they almost immediately default to wanting to tell you about the engineering. And once again, I've been doing this for a really long time, and I tell the engineering people, like, you guys are clearly smart, you guys are doing amazing work, but I don't really care. Just get me from point A to point B and let me know that it works. Like, they want to get into the granular of how, like, the widget, if you will, works. Like, I actually think the storytelling, once again, when I say storytelling, I don't mean like tall tales or anything like that, but I'll give you an example. This is actually a pretty funny story. So I live in Florida, and like the big thing to do is, like, there's the community pool, and everyone has like the people that they hang out with. And one of my buddies, who has a friend that I don't really know that well, is like, oh, like this, I was talking to, like, whatever his name was, and he was ranting on fossil fuels. And of course I told him he should talk to you. I was like, damn it. Like, I'm at the pool with the kids. Like, it's Sunday, 80 degrees, beautiful day out. And the last thing I want to do is talk to, like, some jackass who's going to rail me on, like, why fossil fuels are terrible. And so I was like, fine, like, whatever. And I was cordial. And the analogy I made, I'm like, think of it like this way, dude. I'm not going to tell you about the engineering and all that stuff. Natural gas in particular, but certainly fossil fuels, but hammering on natural gas, that's your fruits and vegetables, right? That is going to ensure that you remain healthy and strong and all the good stuff along with that. Renewables is like Taco Bell. Like, once in a while, it's great and it hits the spot. Like, you go on a night with your buddies, like, you need like a quick fix. It's there for the taking. It's readily available if you need it. That's Taco Bell. Like, I could be fine if I just kept eating fruits and vegetables. Occasionally, though, I'm going to need Taco Bell for whatever the circumstances entail. Like, that's sort of like the energy mix, right? We need natural gas. Like, our everyday living is almost entirely contingent, and it's increasingly contingent, and we can talk about data centers for that matter, on natural gas, right? And over the course of time, nuclear will play a role in that, and maybe some other cool technology that evolves. But for the time being, it's natural gas and nuclear. When, like, things are, when things are good and you don't have any sort of hardship, whether it's weather or, any sort of stress on the grid, hey, Taco Bell makes a lot of sense. You can't survive purely on Taco Bell. Or at least that's not the world that I want to live in. And for I don't think Mrs. Romito would want to live in that world. Certainly our cleaning lady wouldn't. Anyway, but like that was the analogy that I make. And so when we're working with clients, or particularly when we're just having discussions with policymakers, like no one cares about how this stuff is made, right? But what they do care is connecting the dots. And once again, I'll give you another example.
Go for it.
On the renewable crowd, they're very passionate about wind and solar. And like, look, I think wind and solar technology is really, really cool. I have some buddies that have solar companies and their technology is fascinating. And so once again, I'm not anti-wind or solar. I'm just pro what works. And, when I was hearing, well, wind and solar are going to take over and wind and solar are quote unquote clean, I'm like, okay, well, let's look into that. So I just went down this rabbit hole, and the result of that analysis was I wrote a piece that's American coal is cleaner than Chinese solar. And dude, like environmental NGOs lost their mind, right? They thought I was trying to troll them. They thought I was like, just being a jerk for the sake of being a jerk. And like, I mean, my honest intent was I'm just trying to be cute with the title to get views, to get people to download our stuff and read it. But what I found in that analysis and what I've been conveying over the last, I don't know, like year was, China in particular owns 80% of the supply chain that is required for solar and wind technology. And to me, China obviously is an adversary, right? At the best, we're a frenemy with China, right? They rip off our they rip off our IP. They're increasingly hostile towards, Taiwan in particular, which is the epicenter of the semiconductor business. They dabble in stuff that's just not cool and it's annoyance. You have the whole Panama thing, but so nonetheless, like I don't view China as a friend. I view them purely as an adversary. And I think that stupid smirk that Xi Jinping constantly sports on his face, like I wanted to do this thing, right, where like my kids play around with AI all the time. They were trying to make a video of Trump punching Xi Jinping in the face and getting the smirk off his face. Anyway, back to the supply chain stuff. The supply chain is almost entirely contingent upon China. And what's fascinating is that the manufacturing industry is about 40% of Chinese GDP, and it's been increasing for a long time, but notably over the last 5 or 6 years, because the manufacturing of solar and wind technology that's like their thing. And what's frustrating is the only fuel or the only source of energy that burns high enough to smolter and to manufacture these technologies is coal. So yes, we are. This is crazy. I mean, but I have all the data and it's readily available. It's all public. So what you have going on, you essentially have China cornering the market for everything in the renewable supply chain, including rare earth minerals, which are, in not necessarily the greatest places, predominantly like, Central Africa. You have them building a ridiculous amount of coal-fired power plants in order to have the power that would be required to build solar and wind technologies. Then they ship them on a metal crate on a diesel transport across the ocean to the ports of the United States. And so like I tell this very long story because, wind and solar might be alternative technologies, but they're certainly not clean, right? We're utilizing labor that we probably shouldn't be utilizing in Africa. By we, I mean them. And they're utilizing a vast amount of coal-fired power plants. And once again, it's Chinese coal. It's not American coal. Big difference to power these things. And it's fine to be like, hey, like I'm a fan of innovation and technology and I want everything to get more efficient and effective and cheaper and more reliable. Cool. But if you're going to sit here and treat me like I'm an idiot and tell me that wind and solar are zero emissions or the path to zero emissions, all we're doing is telling China to take the emissions load off our hands and put it on their shoulders and then give us stuff that we can have bragging rights, frankly, at the expense of our socioeconomic potential and then our geopolitical, the geopolitical tensions just being cool with that and be like, no, it doesn't make any sense. So I just wish that the storytelling was much more comprehensive, right? You know, we were looking at chapters 1 and 2 of the solar and wind book. We weren't reading the entire book.
I mean, it's when you put it like that, it makes it so interesting to be able to see. It's just like a lot of people are just looking at the, you know, like you said, you know, one or two chapters of it. They're looking at either the end product and the end goal,
Right.
and not thinking about how or where that came from.
Well, they're not even reading like
half
notes,
yet
right?
There's people that will, yet there's the, you know, I'm not going to categorize people, but yet there's the same people that won't drink at certain coffee shops because of where the coffee beans came from.
Yeah, I mean, look, it's the frustrating thing to me. I mean, it works both ways. It has gotten so much better, but I still think the energy space in aggregate, particularly on the public side, feels that any sort of incremental reporting or disclosure or storytelling is like this overwhelming burden. And like, look, dude, no one wants to sit back and write reports or do disclosures. I get it. And at the end of the day, you have to run a business. But, you know, I have this fascinating story. I just gave this presentation where I told this story. When I was at NASDAQ for almost 10 years. I ran their analytics division. And I was fortunate enough to go to this conference where I probably shouldn't say their name, but one of the Magnificent Seven, right? One of the existing Magnificent Seven was presenting, and it was coming off where they had an incident in one of their Chinese factories where people were literally jumping out the window, committing suicide because they were working like 20, 22 hours a day. And I know I'm not going to say the name. People can Google it and probably even people remember. And in that meeting, investors were, hey, tell us what's going on here. And one of the representatives from the company said, raise your hand if you use our product today. And literally everybody in the room raised their hand. And he goes, now lower your hand if you're going to get rid of our product because of what happened. And no one raised their hand. And once again, I'm not saying what happened in the factory is inconsequential. It doesn't matter. My point was that individual made it very, very clear that you can get all righteous and you can get all huffy puffy about what happened. And certainly there should be consequences associated with that. But at the end of the day, you were still going to buy their stuff. In the energy space, I don't necessarily know that we've been afforded that, I don't want to call it luxury, but for lack of a better word, right? And we've had plenty of mishaps. You know, one of the other things in the book that I highlight, you know, people will come up to me and they're like, hey, I saw that movie with Marky Mark about Deepwater Horizon. Like, is that right? Or like, was Aaron Brockovich accurate? And now like the latest trend is like, so was Landman, right? Landman, like that stuff really go on. I'm like, does someone get kidnapped by the cartel and as a negotiating ploy to make a better deal? I'm like, not to my knowledge, and I hope not. But my point on that is it's these external forces that are shaping the collective narrative, which are doing a greater disservice to how the world views the space. And once again, there's improvements and efficiencies, and we're certainly no angels. But we don't necessarily do ourselves a favor by just ignoring what is going around. And once again, like I said, it's getting much, much better, but it still has a long way to go.
We got this comment here from Duck and Blues. We're always are influenced by not in my backyard.
Well, here we go, man. Like here. So let me touch upon that really, really, really quick. The new form of NIMBYism is actually coming in the form of data centers, right? Nobody wants a data center in their backyard. These things are massive. They're stinky. They don't look great. They're not going to help your resale value. I'm probably going to get blocked by Microsoft or Google, whatever. But in any case, like the vast majority of consensus is that we shouldn't build data centers in, let's call it, populated areas. Number one, because of the NIMBYism. Number two, because there's not readily available power. Like CBRE, for example, and I highlight this in one of my speeches. When CBRE, the real estate, call it consulting firm, is working with clients to figure out where they're going to place a data center, the number one constraint that they have is access to reliable power. The second constraint is NIMBYism. So there's this growing thought, this growing consensus that we're going to install data centers in relatively more rural areas. And you see this in practice, right? Recently, the DOE has pinpointed like these 16 sites on federal lands in the middle of nowhere where they're like, hey, let's figure out how to make this like a powerhouse, no pun intended, where we could put data centers. That's great, but back to my point earlier on the transmission and the distribution, like we have to figure that out, and we have to figure that out really, really quick. So I think it was Duncan, right? Duncan, you're spot on with the NIMBYism, but indirectly, the NIMBYism might trigger this movement to finally solve the dilemmas that we have with the transmission and the distribution quandary that we've frankly been having for the last quarter century. That's the optimist in me talking. I think it can happen.
All right, so that was the real quick part, but I want you to do a deeper dive on the data center stuff, because obviously this is a huge topic. It was something that when we met in November at the IADC general meeting, you talked about.
Is that when you yell at everybody? That's awesome. Anyway,
that was during my presentation just before yours. I still think that like there was like exponential decay in the number of people that were attending that, and some of the best presentations were like, I mean, I'm going to be partial to my own, but yours as well, that so many people should have seen.
Yeah, I was a little bit salty. Anyway, continue.
But that was something, that we've been seeing, and I think now everybody is actually understanding the impact that AI is having in their day-to-day life and how they interact and do their job, or with their kids, making funny pictures, and they see it all over, it's all over social media, and like how to start, how to be a prompt engineer, how to start your own business, and every product is powered by AI now. What does that mean though from like an energy standpoint? Because that's where I think like there's a larger impact there than almost in our day-to-day lives.
Yeah, I'm pulling up. I'm not being rude. I have a variety of statistics. I like playing this game, right? We play like almost like the Dan's version of weird Jeopardy, as I call it. So on average, what does a standard household use in terms of kilowatt hours daily, right? What is the daily use of energy in kilowatt hours? Do you know?
I knew you were going to do this. I knew you were going to ask me questions that I was not going to have an answer for.
I should have gave you like the cheat sheet. Anyway, I won't put you on the spot. It's 30. It's 30 kilowatt hours. Okay. How many more times, like what's the magnitude that ChatGPT uses in terms of incremental energy? So how much more energy does ChatGPT use than just the standard amount or the average amount of energy that a household uses on a daily basis?
Ooh, I was going to hope you were going to ask versus just a normal Google search, because I think it was like 9 times more.
Come on, man.
But yeah, I once again, I knew you were going to ask questions that I wasn't going to have the answers for.
17,000. 17,000, right? 17,000. So look at it like this. Right now, the United States has, give or take, about 5,000 regular data centers. And I say regular because the form of artificial intelligence that is about to be exploded onto the scene is called generative AI, right? Generative AI, to your point, makes the cool pictures, the cool videos, like all the cool stuff that's typically referred to as generative AI. You can't necessarily use or retrofit existing data centers. In some cases you can, in most cases you cannot. What needs to be built is what's referred to as a hyperscale data center. And the amount of electricity above and beyond what a hyperscale data center requires over a regular data center is insane. So just to provide some sort of perspective, right now that is about, call it 21 gigawatts, right? So it's 21 gigawatts of power that we need today. In 2035, that goes from 21 to right around 35. And you go 21 to 35, that doesn't sound like a lot, but how many how many windmills powers 1 gigawatt? Do you know?
I don't think there's enough windmills to power a gigawatt. Is going to be my guess.
I mean, you're right. But
All right. Okay.
it's
I got one. I got one.
1 gigawatt is basically 310 utility wind scale turbines. It's about 2,500 solar panels. It's 100 million LED light bulbs. And this sounds like, oh, cool, like so much power. But, we are already at capacity in terms of meeting power demand, right? We have a really big problem in this country with transmission and distribution. We have a really old grid. The grid was last really updated when me and you were born, right? I'm a little bit older than you, I think, but you're talking about a grid that's 45 years old, whatever it may be. And if we're at capacity right now, and if the projected amount of power demand increase is like 150 to 200%, like we got to figure that out really, really quick. And particularly in places where population increase is being experienced the most. Texas is the quintessential example, right? So we just had this. We just reached an all-time high power demand. Do you know what that was?
No.
It's about 80 gigawatts. It's like 80 gigawatts. This happened, I want to say like a month ago. It's definitely recent, but we hit the all-time high. In 2030, do you know what the power demand just in Texas is going to be, like the normal power demand, given all the data centers, given all the population, given all the electrification?
80 gigawatts a day.
Not a day, man. But
yeah,
it hit 80 gigawatts on a day. But just the average daily. So like you're talking about like the peak that we hit, but on a daily basis, it's about 125 to 130. So we're at capacity now. And if things continue to trend the way that they are, like an average day is going to be, let's call it 125. And there is an argument out there, and I sort of buy into it. If you nerd out and you follow the tenets of Moore's law, there's essentially efficiencies that are incorporated within the computing space, every couple of years, and those are exponential, right? So it takes care of a lot of the computing. But the other fact that people don't necessarily realize is that 40% of the electricity dedicated to data centers is just to cool these things, right? The air conditioning. If you have an overheated server, not only does it teeter out that server, it teeters out all the servers that it's connected to. And these things are highly interconnected. So it's not that we have this efficiency in computing. It's that these things are built in massive warehouses that require a ridiculous amount of electricity just to keep them cool. And then if we keep having population increase in Texas, if we keep having industry come to Texas, which I believe in, I think that's a good thing. You also have the simultaneous electrification of the grid. You have more Teslas, you have more electrical stuff, you have more Amazon delivery trucks that are electrified. You have all this, you have electrification in the oil patch. So it's promising, but it's a problem that's not necessarily being discussed because I think in a lot of ways we've been trying to just reason with people about the merits of fossil fuels. And that argument should have been thrown out the window a long time ago, right? It is an empirical fact that the United States, but certainly the globe, should run on natural gas. That should be check that box. Now let's figure out how to update and modernize this grid so that we're not stuck between a rock and a hard place.
What level of demand increase then do you think we will see on natural gas?
Dude, I think it's gonna go through the roof. I mean, here's a couple different theories. You have all these geopolitical tensions going on in Europe. So let's take a couple things one at a time. Europe would be the biggest idiots on the planet, literally, if the Ukraine conflict ended and they continued to buy Russian gas, right? The whole thing that is a mind trip to me is Europe continues to buy Russian gas, which funds Russia's ability to invade Ukraine. But the EU is like, please, let's bring a stop to this war. the quickest way to end the Ukrainian conflict, in my opinion, is why don't you just bankrupt Russia? Like, seems like they can't do much if they don't have money. Anyway, Europeans constantly shoot them. I have this running joke. I wish the Europeans, and I know we have buddies here on Denmark and Netherlands, no offense to y'all. I think Germany in particular has just lost their mind. I think France could or has the opportunity to emerge as like the battery, if you will, of Europe with their nuclear footprint, and they just don't, and I don't know why. I also think objectively that the complexities of the EU, from a regional perspective, like on one hand, you have like these stone cold, like massive Polish dudes in Eastern Europe, and then you have sort of like the guys wearing Speedos, smoking pea lights and hanging out at the pool in like Portugal and Spain. You know what I'm saying? Like you have a very wide disparity of region where Eastern Europe is constantly on reminder about like the Russian bloc. And for all intents and purposes, and I'm generalizing, of course, like Portugal, Spain, it's kind of just like a party 24/7, just different priorities, different focus, different everything. So I don't envision the Ukrainian conflict taking place much longer. I think Trump has that in his crosshairs. And what is fascinating to me is that Germany has decommissioned their nuclear program. Don't ask me why. It's the dumbest thing I've ever heard. France is not necessarily stepping up to the plate. They do sell, let's call it excess energy primarily to like Italy, but they're not stepping up to supply the broader EU. And the grid in Europe is older and more beat up than ours. So in terms of like implementing more renewable technology, they may build it, but they're not going to be implementing it. I've read a report the other day that about 2 terawatt hours or 2 terawatts of power from renewables is just wasted in Europe, right? So that's enough power. For context, for people who don't realize how much that is, 2 terawatts you could power 200 average American homes for 1 year, right? So back to my point, transmission distribution. So anyway, my whole point of going through that escapade is that by default, natural gas seems like the most logical answer. And that's actually a good thing, right? Natural gas has facilitated the ability of the Western economies led by the United States to increase GDP substantially over the last, call it 40 years, while simultaneously decreasing emissions per capita, right? We have been decoupling, and that's linearly correlated to the higher implementation and utilization of natural gas. So if the EU is so fixated on climate, which they are, like natural gas solves both problems. It weans them off Russia and it allows them to decarbonize, right? Because they have still coal and all that stuff as well. And oh, by the way, Norway is importing or exporting a ton of gas to the UK. So it's not like they're not doing this already. So you have this whole sort of landscape of opportunity in the EU that America can address. In the United States, we're like 40% natural gas today in terms of the national energy mix. If you look for certain examples, or let's call it blueprints of what the energy mix in the United States should be based on where we think data centers are going, we have this model already. It's in Ashburn, Virginia. Ashburn is commonly referred to as the data center capital of the world. About 70% of the world's internet traffic goes through Ashburn. The running joke is you probably don't want to know what type of internet traffic it is. It's it's not really for a family program. Anyway, neither here nor there. But Virginia, that particular region, Ashburn, is 60% natural gas and 30% nuclear. The United States in its entirety is 40% natural gas and just under 20, right? It's like 15 to 18, whatever it is. What's interesting as well is that Ashburn, Virginia has less than a 10% reliance on renewables. It just doesn't happen because when you think about it, the constant stream of power that is required 24/7 for data centers, like a data center is not going to say, hey, it's 3 a.m, we're going to stop doing data center stuff. It's like, no, it's this continuous loop. So I think if you extrapolate that out, And hyperscale data centers are being built literally in every single major market, right? There's a map, and I have this, but it's literally every single major market, and even the rural parts, as I said before. Like, it's pretty realistic. It's pretty pragmatic to say the United States, because of the next wave of economic opportunity, which will frankly determine not only socioeconomic dynamics, but geopolitical tensions as well. We should go from 40% nat gas to 60% nat gas. We should go from 15% nuclear to 30% nuclear. And, I don't say we cut out renewables because that's regionally contingent. I had, once again, side story tangent. I had this guy in Wisconsin basically yelling in my face, and he was not a big man, right? Which was, I had to I needed like a horse tranquilizer after the conversation. He was so adamant that his group was doing such amazing things for the lower income populations of Milwaukee. He's like, we're putting solar panels on low income housing. And I was like, it was more choice language. I'm like, why are you doing that? He's like, well, they get to save electricity. It's like, okay. It's like, what's the shelf life of a solar panel in Milwaukee, where in the winter it's miserably cold? You have snow, you have hail, you have sleet, you have ice. And oh, by the way, the sun doesn't come out in the wintertime. Like, Milwaukee gets maybe 100 days of sunshine per year. We in Florida, maybe makes sense, we get 320 days of sunshine. But what's the shelf life? He's like, it's like 4 years. I'm like, okay, so you put these solar panels on the house in these low income housing communities. Like, then what? Like, who's on the hook to repair them or replace them should anything go wrong? He's like, well, it's part of the home. It's like the homeowner's responsibility. It's like, well, how much money are you saving them? He's like, and he said like 5 cents, like a kilowatt hour or something stupid. And I'm like, well, that's not even going to be a savings, right? Because if you extrapolate that out, like, you're going to save them what, like $50 over 4 years? And then what's it cost to repair a solar panel on a roof? Like, my brother-in-law owns a roofing company. So I'm texting him. He's like, dude, I just did one. It was like 12 grand. Like, this mindset is so stupid. Like short-term gratification to get a like on Facebook at the expense of long-term economic planning. Like, that's a microcosm for this conversation. But sort of back to the energy mix, we go from 40% nat gas to 60% nat gas. We go from 15 nuclear to like 35% nuclear. And depending on whatever region you are, like West Texas, wind makes sense. Like in Florida, solar can make sense. Like Milwaukee or Pittsburgh, no offense to those, like, the sun doesn't come out. Like, why? And the winter sucks. Why would we put more renewable on there? It doesn't make any sense to me.
This is absolutely fascinating to hear. At what point, though? So, like, we see this in oil and gas, right? Yeah. That when gas prices peak up, that we see more drilling in the Marcellus, the Haynesville, Utica, in these plays where they are predominantly gas heavy.
Yeah.
Is there a tip?
When you say gassy? Like, my kids, I work from home sometime, and I'll say that, and they just bust out laughing because they're 11. Anyway, continue.
Yeah, mine are the same age. Yeah. So, is there a point to where you think, like we know that in those areas we'll see more rig activity. We will see the smaller operators, start to pick up rigs and start drilling. Is there a point in time where you would envision that, France or Germany or any of these European countries that, like, I know France has banned fracking as a whole.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Is there a point in time where they go, oh, because I already know that there's an arbitrage between our gas and our gas prices and theirs. That's why we, ship over giant NGL, I don't know, freighters or whatever you were called, like ships over there to be able to sell it to them. Like, is there a point in time where they go, maybe we should start drilling in our own backyard? Because
so unfortunately, no, which actually why I'm bullish on the U.S. space. But let me walk you through this, and I'm writing on this literally as we speak, because I asked myself the same question. I'm like, I mean, there's so many jokes I have, between berets and baguettes and skinny jeans about like France. I just won't go down there. But like in all seriousness, there's a couple different dynamics that we as Americans have to acknowledge about Europe. So the European government basically follows the European Climate Risk Assessment. It's the EU CRA, like that is a thing. And in that assessment, they basically highlight 36 different climate risks. And why that's so relevant is that this assessment was the foundation to what inevitably became the European climate law, right? So their policies relating to mitigating these 36 climate risks that were identified in the assessment have been codified into law. Right or wrong, it is a law, right? And the reason I don't think it will get repealed is that if you thought the bureaucracy in the United States government was epic, the EU takes it to a whole nother level. Once again, it's very hard to get consensus on anything there because of the range of the regions. But climate in the European from the European perspective is something that still has a large amount of relative public support, even though the Green Party in Germany has sort of been scaled back, and even though they're getting a little bit more of their senses. You do not have the same sort of perspectives on climate that you have in the United States, right? The United States, if we're guilty of something, it's definitely dissonance, right? We think that the rest of the globe thinks how we think, and frankly, they don't. The United States in that regard is actually the outlier. Like, we're the weirdo. They look at the United States and they sort of scoff because they're like, oh, climate, like you guys don't take it as seriously as you should. And I'll give you an example. So I spent a lot of time in Europe at NASDAQ, got to go to Copenhagen, London, Stockholm, Frankfurt, all over the place. And, most of that work was talking with investors just to get their take on how they viewed ESG or climate or what have you. And man, sometimes I would walk out of those meetings and I would need like a pea light, like I would need a French cigarette. Just like, what are these guys thinking? It was just so different, but it was actually really, really refreshing because I came in with like these preconceived notions, and I had certain opinions on certain things. And like, I would call my buddies back home and be like, I'm going to run this by you, and you're going to tell me if I'm crazy or not. And so when I gave my opinion, they're like, no, that makes total sense. And when I gave the European, they're like, what the hell are you talking about? But anyway, it was a good way to understand like how the world just views certain things outside the United States. I was in Amsterdam a year ago, whatever it was, like 12, 15 months. Yeah, it would have been like a year ago, giving a presentation on basically in the most professional and kindest terms, telling the Europeans, kind of get your act together. Like, this renewable thing is actually going to come back and bite you in the butt purely for socioeconomic reasons. But on top of that, there's all these geopolitical tensions with Russia, China, Iran, Iraq that you should at least be aware of before you make your bed with the renewables. And once again, not anti-renewables, just pro what works. And I had this guy, once again, very aggressive German, shocker, where he was yelling at me, literally yelling at me that natural gas is a lie because we need to be calling it fossil fuel gas so everyone understands it. And I started to get irritated. I'm like, dude, I don't give a shit what you call it. You need it. Like, call it whatever you want. Like, I don't care. Like, because I had gone through the charts, graphs, tables. I kept my patience. And after like the third interruption, it's just like, all right, dude, I'm gonna let you have it. And once again, but back to your question on will Europe do it? No, because the legal framework which they operate within prohibits it. And the probability of those laws being repealed are actually relatively low because the EU is littered with this bureaucracy that frankly just doesn't get stuff done. There's a complete inefficiency in that. And that's unfortunate for a variety of different reasons. I mean, what I do envision is sort of work with what you got. I do think, and once again, I'm pro-nuclear. I do think it would make sense for France to be a larger export to their brethren. I would like to see Germany. I won't say what I'm going to say. I would like to see Germany become more sensible and go back to nuclear. I would like to see the EU. Not that I want to compete with the US, but the EU take a page out of the UK's book and be like, yeah, let's import us some Norwegian gas, right? If you look at just the data, the Norwegians are actually more efficient in terms of like flaring, right? They just don't do it. They've mastered that technology. Now they don't do it at the same scale that we do, so there's a little bit of cheating, lovingly, quote unquote, going on, but with the numbers. But I feel like Europe has lost their way in terms of just following sensible policy, right? Looking at charts, tables, graphs, and saying, when it comes to balancing socioeconomic priorities with social priorities, with environmental priorities, without sort of losing geopolitical, let's call it, levers, like this is what works. And we definitely have that in the States, but it's certainly not as bad.
Well,
all your European viewers just left.
We'll see how this plays into it, because I know that this is a quote unquote hot topic in Europe. So Dan, there's a lot of excitement around oil and gas drilling well construction enabling significant growth in geothermal. How do you view the future of geothermal for power generation?
Yeah, geothermal is awesome, and I think it has a lot of potential. It definitely has a ways to go, but I'll give you an example. I moonlight, believe it or not, as an adjunct professor at Marquette University. Yes, this guy right here is molding young minds. Which
sign me up for that class right now.
Which is pretty scary. Yeah, there's so many stories that off camera we'll do over drinks on it. Everything from them thinking like I walk into class and they think I'm a student, to like, just giving the business to a student who's just like get off his rocker and on his high horse about like the evils of fossil fuel, or capitalism. I'm like, this course is called financial analytics, dude. Like there is no place for communism or socialism. Like beat it, nerd. Anyway, the Marquette is doing this interesting analysis looking at the viability of incorporating geothermal onto the campus. And what they have found is, unbeknownst to them, sort of just serendipitously, a lot of the underground infrastructure relating to sewer management and sewer infrastructure actually facilitates the ability to retrofit geothermal capabilities. I understand like half of this stuff. And like, once again, the engineers and the physicists are talking to me. I'm like, cool. And then like someone asked me what they say. I'm like, I have no idea. Like it just sounded awesome. But they are actually really, really bullish on that stuff. So I think whether it's coincidental or serendipitous or whatever, it sounds to me that in certain locations, there's infrastructure in place that can relatively speaking, be retrofitted to accommodate geothermal. I just think once again, it's sort of being held up by what you think. It's administration, right? Colleges move really, really slow. Cities, particularly in the north, good Lord, move really, really slow. And so it's not that there's a motivation not to do it. I think it's held up by a lot of bureaucracy that either has this agenda that they want to maintain, like the status quo, or they're frankly afraid of like, well, which is fair. Like what happens if this goes wrong and like sewer caps are blowing up and, hitting old ladies in the face? Like we don't want that. But yeah, geothermal is awesome. I think it has legs. It's just, in its relatively infancy. It's a relatively nascent technology.
I'm bullish on it just because I think that the more that we do within oil and gas and our drilling efficiency and the technologies that we create, whether it be rotary steerables, PDCs, any of the procedural applications of drilling, all of that just brings geothermal along with us, making it more and more cost effective.
So bringing it back to like Landman, like I mean, God bless that show for a couple of reasons, and then it's also a curse on a couple of other ones. And we can talk about the curses a little bit later. I think one of the things at the forefront is, when I would go to New York, and I haven't been in California in a couple of years for a variety of different reasons. I think they would just kick me out and deport me immediately. I wrote this paper. I write, for a couple of lobbyists, and one of the papers was like, I literally wrote, "Don't California my Texas," and just listed out all the reasons. Like California is insane. Anyway, When I went to New York, one of the things that was evident to me is that when the coastal pension funds, coastal endowments, coastal institutional investors think about West Texas, and I'm not speaking in hyperbole here, they think it's a bunch of meatheads digging like a 8-foot hole in the ground, filling it up with M80s and just blowing stuff up. And it's like they don't, and it's better, but it's very clear that some of them have this stereotype where they don't understand how intricate and how sophisticated and how complex this technology was. And this actually, I coined the term technergy, right? It's a play on technology and energy, cute and crafty. I know, but you know, there has to be a greater appreciation for the technological prowess and the innovation that we've installed. Like our dad's fracking, not the fracking today. You know, I think Chevron's even talking about like triple loop fracking or whatever the hell they're calling it. It sounds amazing. The efficiencies with spill management, the efficiencies with water management. Once again, long way to go. But you know, there's reports that methane management in West Texas has, you know, decreased like 30%. You know, we've all these cool technologies that we've implemented because the market has told us this is important to us and we want you to figure it out. And for all intents and purposes, we figured it out. But back to my comment on storytelling, no one really understands that or is aware of it or appreciates it outside of, you know, Texas, Oklahoma, probably Florida, maybe a smidge of Tennessee. Certainly not in New York, definitely not in Chicago, no way in Boston, like where most of these money centers actually reside. And that's evident, right, for a variety of different reasons. But in part because of the narrative, you have technology that makes up 30% of the S&P 500. And on a good day, maybe energy makes up 4% of the S&P. But I actually think that changes. I think, not to go on a rant here, I do think energy, particularly natural gas, is going to be viewed upon as a supply chain component to technology. That's straight out of the no duff files for us. But, you know, when you look at sort of like this reindustrialization that's going on globally, Apple, for example, do you know how many suppliers Apple has in Europe? How many do you think?
30.
4,000.
Go.
4,000. The vast majority of Apple's supply chain actually resides in Europe. It's not China. And I think over the course of the next 10, 15, 20 years, if the Trump doctrine continues, which in many ways I think it should, I personally feel that, like we are going to wean ourselves off the reliance of China. I think that's just purely from a military perspective, like we should be doing that. But there's not a lot of places to go. So you go to Europe. Because this stuff is codified into Europe, and because the vast majority of the companies in Europe are actually larger, right? The average market cap of a publicly traded company within the Euro Stoxx 50, which is their S&P 500, it's about 120 billion. The average size of an S&P 500 listed company is like 90 billion, so much bigger. Like, I just think the standard changes. I think the technology evolves to where we're not guesstimating emissions. We're actually using really cool pieces of technology to monitor, to quantify, to verify, to certify. I think that's on the forefront of the industry. And I can envision this, like the quintessential East versus West thing going on. Like, I don't think like that's out of the realm of possibility where China isolated to the extent that's reasonable economically, which means that the trade-off on that is a greater burden of compliance, regulation, reporting, because we're partnering more and more with the Europeans who love themselves some compliance. They do. Weird.
So much in this episode. I got to put these up there real quick. I forgot how good it was to watch this live podcast.
Thanks, Caesar. I was actually really nervous. I thought I was going to say something stupid. Maybe I did. I don't know.
And then we rarely get these kind of compliments, but I do.
Thanks,
I like
Duncan.
This guy. He agrees with me.
Duncan's
So
my
it's
dude.
great stuff. All right. So I got one more thing to ask you before I know you got to go. All right. Give us your breakdown on the tariffs real quick, because I know we talked about that. Just Yeah.
How much time do I have, dude? How much?
Hey, this show can go as long as you want.
Right,
I don't book anything in my
tariffs.
Friday
So
afternoon.
let's do this. I'll say this. Like, okay. Like, am I personally against the textbook definition of tariffs? Yes. The textbook definition of tariffs is essentially an incremental tax on the U.S. consumer. We all know that. We learned that in like 5th grade, whatever it was. Do I think?
Yeah, we learned that at the same time. Electricity comes from electricity.
Yeah, that's right. I think. Yeah, same time. It's probably the same teacher too. She probably had purple hair or something. Anyway, like, do I think Trump sporadically said, I'm just going to lay tariffs on for the sake of tariffs? No, I don't. Like, this, for the same reason that guy came into office and got a ridiculous amount of stuff done within literally 30 days. I think the team that he had organized sat down way before inauguration and said, here's what we are going to do. Now, did it go to plan? Absolutely not. Like, the Trump crystal ball say this is how it's going to pan out? No. But I think what was intended was, we are going to stick it to China, but we can't necessarily just isolate them or pinpoint them. I don't know if that will have the implications or the results that we would want. So we're going to kill 3 birds with 1 stone. We are going to try to get rates lowered because we have to refinance government debt. And when you obviously lower rates, that's sort of an artificial plug into the economy. But we're also going to show other companies that we just mean business, right? That we're going to show everyone that we're not messing around. And what we're going to end up doing is we're going to get some quick wins, because some companies will cater, and they'll cater fast, and China will not, right? I think he was playing the odds that Xi Jinping was going to remain stubborn and the Chinese government was not going to give in as quickly as other countries. And then he was going to stick it to China. Like, I think that was the intention. And once again, I think Trump, he's been described in many ways as a utilitarian. He's a businessman, dude. He's going to look at the state of the state in relation to sentiment and data and where things are headed. And he's not an ideologue. Like, he's not going to double down on something that's not going to work. He's going to say, this isn't working, so we're going to pivot. And in many ways, that's sort of his strength. Now, does he message it like the way that he probably should to calm the markets? Clearly not. But I don't actually get all beat out of shape with the market volatility, because what people don't realize, and we were talking about this, 70% of market trading is algorithms. It's quantitative trading, right? When Jim Cramer is on CNBC going like, oh, the market, like, Jim Cramer doesn't know what the hell he's talking about. Like, that is an algorithm programmed to search for very specific economic levers and make decisions on what economic levers are pulled or not pulled. And clearly, tariffs at a headline level are just massive levers. So did the market tank more than it should? Yes. It will also go up more than it should, because the vast majority of trading in the market is quantitative. It's not, there's very little human
element. It's not me and you on Robinhood.
Right. There's not a bunch of dorks on Excel spreadsheets doing cash flow models and saying this is the intrinsic value of it. There's some of that, but it pales into comparison of what the volume associated with quantitative and algorithmic trading is. Like, so tariffs, like, I don't necessarily like its impact on oil price. I don't want to see oil at 55, 60 bucks. I think it will be ideally at 75, 80 bucks. But once again, like, I have confidence in Trump that he's not an ideologue. I have confidence that he is a businessman and a utilitarian, and he will listen to business leaders who are like, dude, we can't have $55 oil, and we don't want you manipulating markets, but we want you to put in economic feelers and indicators that would convince the market that, hey, let's go back to 70, 75, even 80 bucks.
I just want to keep asking you questions, but I know you got to
go.
More.
What the hell? I got like 10 minutes. Do it.
Okay. What's on your plate right now that you think more people should know and understand?
Ooh, that's a real good one. Damn. Okay. Here we go.
I've been doing this a while.
Yeah. You're a professional. I get it. I think here, a very specific example. I don't like how the industry is so obsessed with like what they refer to as like the ESG pendulum. I don't like that. I think the ESG experiment was actually beneficial to the sector because we were able to filter out and figure out what is actually material to valuation and what isn't, right? We were able to empirically make that distinction between this is a nice to have, this aspect of ESG is nice to have, this aspect of ESG is dumb, and this aspect of ESG actually makes a lot of sense. What I am fearful of is that the sector is saying, because of the Trump administration's election or entrance into the Oval Office, is like, oh, we don't need any of it. It's like, no. Once again, back to my perspective on the capital markets. The capital markets were conditioned to get certain data points that it could be a check the box. It could be something that they take to heart. But if you take it away, that looks weird. And frankly, you're 4% of the S&P, the other 96% do it. Like, just don't be that reactive to anything. I would like to see this sort of immunity from the political pendulum. So in other words, stop being so reactive and be much more proactive and preemptive and showcasing what the company is going to look like in 5, 6 years. 10 years is kind of unfair. I also don't like the fact that, and this is a generational thing, and it's not a widespread problem, but it's evident, or it's in the space enough where it's very noticeable. The old timers, they're like, we've been measuring emissions with spreadsheets since like, the 90s. I'm like, that's great. I got news for you. Technology evolves. When technology evolves, so do expectations. And now you have a lot of really cool and smart technologists that came from Silicon Valley that are entering the energy space, providing really interesting and effective technologies that give a better perspective of what I would call risk, right? But that is conflated with, like this liberal ESG, like anti-fossil fuel garbage, like throw it out. It's like, no, once again, like two things can be true at once. You can learn from a detractor in the sense of, well, how are you viewing the world? Like, okay, some of that actually makes sense and we should adopt that. Some of the other stuff, you're just out of your mind and that's idiotic and I'm going to show you why, but I'm going to do it with data, right? I'm going to do it objectively. I'm not just going to fight. And so like why I say that's relevant is because in most cases, if you're having this debate, where it usually goes is climate change isn't real or climate change is real. And then you just have like sort of like this mean girls bickering where nothing gets solved. Like my advice to the space is don't try to convince someone who thinks climate change is a thing that it's not a thing. And don't try to convince someone who thinks it's not a thing that it is a thing. That's just going nowhere. What you want to do is you want to have readily available material, non-financial data, emissions, waste, water, spills, health and safety, right? That empirically and objectively show we're awesome, we're progressing awesome, we're better than our peer class, we're better than these other sectors. If you have a problem with it, you're barking up the wrong tree, right? Here's your piece of paper, here's the report card, I got all A's and B's, like get lost, get out of here. And we just don't do that. I wish it was much more professionally speaking in your face and quantitative, and we're getting there, but we're not quite there. And that's a lot of the stuff that I'm working on right now.
Fantastic. Thank you, sir.
Yeah, man. This was awesome.
Absolutely amazing guest. We need to do this like twice a year at least, or maybe even once a quarter. Like the information and everything that you're providing. I got put on my post, the Rigflation post I put on LinkedIn not too long ago.
Yeah.
Like if you're not paying attention to data centers and how they're affecting the energy landscape, you've got your head in the sand. So,
well, I mean, not to give the gratuitous plug, but I have on my LinkedIn, it's the U.S. needs a larger energy boat, and it's public. It's like 90 slides, whatever it is. Check it out. If anyone has questions, I love talking about this stuff. I know that sounds pathetic to admit, but it's what I'm passionate about.
If anybody is watching, can plug Dan's LinkedIn link into the comments, or just tag him there in the comments so that you make it a quick little thing over there. I mean, it's probably already in the description of the video or whatever, but
could be.
Thank you so much for coming on the show, man.
Yeah, dude,
I really, really do appreciate it. For everybody who's watching, be sure to put in #RigReports Thank you so much to our sponsors, Talal and the guys over there. Absolutely amazing. We'll do here. Let me put this up there. John says, "Great show. Thanks, Dan and David."
Was John the guy from Denmark?
No,
Okay.
that was
He left a
Soren.
long time ago. Okay. He just said good afternoon, being very
yeah. I mean, we do get quite the international audience on here sometimes. So Robert says, great insights, Dan. Thanks for sharing. I knew this was going to be a good episode. And this is the thing, is like, I know we have great episodes and more people should be tuning in. That's it. Tag somebody in the comment section that you think would enjoy the show or enjoy watching it. Give them a little message while I pull up the stuff here for doing our quick little giveaway. All right, giveaway tool, share. The screen's going to start to glitch out. Then I'm going to add this to the stage. There we go. Click back over here. All right, and 3, 2, 1, drawings. There we go. All right, we'll see who our winner is for today. They're going to get Drill Bit, Fast Boat, Black, and then a nameplate by the guys over there. All right, Josh Groves. Winner, chicken dinner. Thank you, sir, for tuning in and watching the show. We do appreciate it. All right, I'll go ahead and take that one off of there. And then, let's see, media assets. One more time. We'll throw this up there on the screen. Hashtag Rig Reports. Sponsor for today. Thank you guys so much for them being here and helping us out. Don't have a show next week. It's Good Friday. We will start coming back to you right after that with a lot of shows, doing plenty of stuff. And I guess that's it for me. As always, let me find the thing. Know your industry.